All right, so today we're going to be diving deep into marketing effectiveness.
Ooh, sounds fun.
Yeah. And to kick things off, um, imagine you're a CMO, right?
Yeah, okay.
And you're trying to figure out the ROI of something like paid search.
Yeah.
Seems like a simple question. You ask your team, and you get 5 different answers,
No.
ranging from like 5 to 50 pounds.
Ugh, yeah, I've been there.
So frustrating, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a headache that I think every marketer has dealt with, like, at some point, and it just feels like the more data we have, the harder it is to get a straight answer.
Totally.
But luckily, that's exactly why this deep dive is so important and timely. We're going to be looking at some excerpts from Making Effectiveness Work,
Ooh, okay.
which is a new report that's tackling this problem head on.
So is this report like the magic decoder ring for marketing data?
Well, not quite magic,
Okay.
but it does offer like a really insightful look at how the field of marketing effectiveness has evolved. I mean, do you remember the days when we just relied on gut feeling and spray and pray tactics?
Oh, yeah.
Thankfully, we've come a long way.
I hope so.
Check.
So walk me through it then. What are some of the biggest takeaways from how marketing effectiveness has changed?
Okay, well, first off, the sheer amount of data we have access to now is mind-blowing.
It really is.
Like, think about all the different channels and platforms and touch points.
Yeah.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah.
And this is but it's not just about the volume of data, right? It's
Yeah.
about using it effectively. And I think this report really emphasizes the need for an effectiveness culture.
Okay.
This mindset where everyone from the CMO to the, individual campaign manager is committed to using data to make better decisions.
That makes a lot of sense, but I'm guessing that's easier said than done, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because not every marketer is like a data scientist.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why the report actually digs into these different decision cultures that exist within marketing organizations. So you've got the strategic level with the CMO and finance folks.
Yeah.
Then you have the teams running individual campaigns.
Yeah.
And then you have the people, deep in the weeds optimizing things at the tactical level.
Right.
And each of these groups has different needs and different standards of evidence when it comes to measurement.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So how do you get everyone on the same page then?
Well, that's where the concept of a learning agenda comes in.
Oh,
It's basically a framework for bridging those different cultures.
Yes.
By focusing on these shared questions and a commitment to finding answers together.
gotcha.
So instead of just throwing data around, it's about being really intentional with what you're trying to learn and how you're going to measure success.
Okay, that's starting to make a little bit more sense now.
Good.
But how do you actually go about building this learning agenda then?
Right.
What are the right questions we should be asking?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And thankfully, this report gives us some pretty solid guidance. One of the key principles is prioritization,
Right.
because you can't tackle everything at once. So they suggest starting with the most high-impact decisions
Okay.
and asking, what evidence would change our minds?
Ooh.
And this forces you to really think critically about your assumptions
Yeah.
and identify the knowledge gaps that you need to fill.
So it's less about finding the one right answer and more about being open to questioning like what you think you know.
Exactly. It's a journey of continuous learning and improvement.
I like that.
And speaking of learning, let's talk about the different techniques that marketers can use to measure effectiveness.
Okay, wait. Before we jump into the techniques,
Yeah.
I want to go back to the learning agenda for a sec.
Sure.
Can you give me like a real world example? Because I'm a bit of a hands-on learner.
Absolutely. So let's say you're launching a new product
Okay.
and you're debating between, focusing your efforts on social media marketing or influencer collaborations. Right. A good learning agenda question might be, what level of engagement and reach do we need to achieve on social media versus influencer channels to justify the cost?
Right. So it's about framing the question in a way that helps you decide which path to take.
Precisely.
Gotcha.
It's about gathering the evidence you need to make informed decisions.
Okay.
And that brings us to those core techniques themselves.
Okay.
We've got marketing mix modeling or MMM experiments and attribution,
Yeah.
all powerful tools in the modern marketer's arsenal.
It's amazing how far we've come in terms of like the tools and techniques that are available to us now.
Yeah.
It's definitely not your grandma's marketing playbook anymore.
You got that right. And what's great is this report doesn't just describe these techniques in a vacuum.
Okay.
It actually provides a framework for using them in combination
Okay.
to get a much more complete picture of your marketing effectiveness.
Ooh.
And they call it the MSI approach.
MSI.
Yes.
Okay.
Model, experiment, simulate,
MSI okay, sounds like something you order at a fancy coffee shop.
Right.
But seriously, can you break that down for me?
Yeah.
Like, what's the thinking behind combining all these different techniques?
Yeah. So each technique has its strengths and weaknesses, right?
Right.
So, for example, MMM is great for understanding the big picture, how different marketing channels contribute to overall sales.
Okay.
But it might not be as precise when it comes to measuring the impact of, say, a small influencer campaign.
Gotcha.
Whereas experiments are the gold standard for measuring incrementality.
Okay.
But they can be costly and difficult to scale.
Yeah.
And then attribution, while widely used, can be misleading if you're trying to compare performance across different channels.
So MSI is about using these different tools strategically
Exactly.
to fill in the gaps
Yes.
and get a more holistic view.
Exactly. So you start with a model, whether it's MMM attribution, something else,
Yeah.
to get a sense of the landscape, and then you use experiments to address specific knowledge gaps. Maybe you want to test the effectiveness of a new creative approach or compare different influencer tiers.
Okay.
You then feed the results of those experiments back into your model.
Right.
And then you use simulation to explore different scenarios and see, what happens if you shift budget or change tactics, and then finally you implement your plan
Right.
and continue to test and learn along the way.
So it's an ongoing process.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. I'm liking this MSI approach. It sounds very action-oriented.
Yeah.
But what about the long-term impact of marketing then?
Right.
How do you measure something as intangible as brand building?
That is a great question, and it's something that the report tackles head on.
Okay.
The truth is, measuring the long-term value of advertising is tough, but it's absolutely crucial,
Yeah.
especially for brands that are focused on building lasting relationships.
So what's the solution then?
Yeah.
How do you measure something that might not pay off for months or even years down the line?
Well, the report suggests a few different approaches, ranging from simple floating-based models to more complex consumer preference models.
Okay.
But honestly, one of the most practical starting points is often industry benchmarks and brand tracking data.
So basically, you're looking at how your brand is perceived over time and comparing your performance to others in your industry.
Exactly. It's about getting a sense of whether your marketing efforts are moving the needle in the right direction.
Right.
And it's important to make sure your simulation and planning tools reflect the full value of brand activities, not just short-term returns.
Okay, that's a lot to digest. We've covered a lot of grounds, from the evolution of marketing effectiveness to the importance of this effectiveness culture, the learning agenda, the MSI approach, and even the challenges of measuring long-term value.
We have.
I'm starting to feel like a marketing effectiveness ninja.
Don't get too cocky just yet. We've only just scratched the surface.
Okay,
But I think this gives us a great foundation for the rest of our deep dive.
awesome. I'm excited.
It's fascinating to me how much this report really emphasizes, experimentation.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just about proving your hypotheses, right?
Yeah.
It's about using experiments as a tool for, discovery and innovation.
So instead of just asking, did this campaign work?
Right.
You're asking, what can we learn from it regardless of the outcome?
Exactly. A true effectiveness culture embraces both successes and failures
Okay.
as opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
The report even argues that a well-designed experiment can sometimes be more valuable when it disproves your hypothesis.
Really?
Because it challenges you to rethink your assumptions and explore new possibilities.
Okay, I have to admit, though, I've always found experiments a bit daunting.
Yeah.
They can be time-consuming,
Yeah.
they can be expensive, and sometimes, let's be honest, the results are just confusing.
Oh, believe me, I've been there.
Okay, good.
But the report offers some great tips for making experimentation less intimidating and more effective.
Okay.
It all starts with, asking the right questions and choosing the right metrics. So what are you trying to understand? Are you trying to understand the impact of different creative elements?
Okay.
Or maybe you want to compare the effectiveness of different influencer tiers?
So you're saying it's about being laser-focused on what you're trying to learn,
Exactly.
rather than just throwing spaghetti at the wall
Yes.
and seeing what sticks.
Precisely. And once you've, defined your objective, it's all about choosing the right metrics that actually measure what you care about.
Right.
The report stresses the importance of going beyond those vanity metrics like clicks and impressions
Yeah.
and focusing on metrics that are tied to real business outcomes.
Right, because a million likes doesn't mean much if it's not translating into sales or leads or whatever it is.
Exactly. And another key piece of advice is making sure you have a robust sample size.
Okay.
And this is especially important for online experiments where it's really easy to get excited about early results that might not actually be statistically significant.
So don't pop the champagne just because your first A/B test shows a slight lift in conversions.
Haha, exactly. Patience is a virtue in the world of experimentation.
Yeah.
And, the report also reminds us that even with the best practices in place,
Yeah.
experiments can sometimes, lead to a bias towards short-term thinking.
Right.
So it's easy to get caught up in optimizing for those immediate results. But we need to remember that, building a strong brand is a marathon, not a sprint.
Which brings us back to the challenge of measuring the long-term value.
Right.
Any more pearls of wisdom from the report on that?
Well, they highlight the importance of tracking brand metrics like awareness and consideration, perception over time.
Okay.
And it's not always easy to connect those metrics directly to sales, but they can give you valuable insights into the long-term impact of your marketing efforts.
So you're looking at things like, are people more likely to recognize your brand after seeing your ads?
Yeah.
Are they more likely to consider your product when they're making a purchase?
Exactly. And the report also encourages, marketers to use industry benchmarks to see how their brand's performance stacks up against competitors.
Okay.
Which can help you identify areas where you're excelling and areas where you might need to, step up your game.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say we've run our experiments, we've gathered our data, we have a good understanding of both the short-term and long-term performance.
Right.
What's next?
Well, this is where the simulate part of the MUSI approach comes in.
Okay.
Simulation is like a virtual laboratory where you can test different scenarios and see how various factors interact.
So it's like a choose your own adventure, but for marketers.
Uh-huh. I like that it's about exploring different paths and seeing where they lead.
Okay.
So you know what happens if you shift your budget from TV advertising to social media?
Okay.
What's the impact of increasing your influencer spending?
And the beauty of simulation is that you can do all of this without actually risking any real-world budget.
Exactly. It's a safe space to experiment and test your assumptions. And, one of the hidden benefits of simulation is that it actually forces you to make those assumptions explicit.
Okay.
You have to define your key variables, your relationships between those variables, the time frame you're considering.
So you can't just say, I think social media is more effective than TV.
Right.
You have to actually quantify those beliefs
Yeah.
and put them into the model.
Exactly. And that process of quantification can be incredibly insightful.
Okay.
Because it can reveal blind spots in your thinking and highlight areas where you need more data or better insights.
Okay, I'm sold on simulation.
Yeah.
But all this data and modeling can feel a bit overwhelming, especially for smaller teams with limited resources.
Yeah.
Any advice for those of us who aren't working with Google-sized budgets?
Well, that's a valid concern. And
Okay.
the report emphasizes that you don't need a team of data scientists to
Okay.
build a strong effectiveness culture.
Right.
It's about starting small, focusing on the questions that matter most to your business,
Okay.
and gradually building your capabilities over time.
So maybe start with a simple spreadsheet model
Exactly.
before investing in some fancy software.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to leverage free or low-cost tools and resources.
Right.
There are tons of great online courses and communities where you can learn the basics of marketing analytics.
And even if you do outsource some of the heavier lifting to an agency or a consultant,
Yeah,
it's still crucial to have at least a basic understanding
right.
of the underlying principles.
Absolutely. That way you can ask the right questions, interpret the data effectively, and ensure that your marketing investments are actually aligned with your business objectives.
It strikes me that the focus of marketing effectiveness has really shifted over time.
Okay.
It used to be all about accountability,
Yeah.
proving to the CFO that we were spending the budget wisely.
Right.
But now it's much more about informing decision-making,
Yeah.
driving innovation,
Yeah.
and ultimately creating a competitive advantage.
I agree. And I think this report makes a very strong case for why that shift is so important.
Right.
Because in today's, complex and rapidly evolving marketing landscape, a robust effectiveness culture
Right.
is no longer a nice to have. It's a necessity.
I completely agree. Yeah, it really is remarkable how much the whole concept of marketing effectiveness has evolved.
It is.
From proving our worth to the CFO
Right.
to becoming a key driver of innovation and strategy.
Yeah, it highlights a really crucial shift in mindset, right?
Yeah.
Effectiveness is no longer just about justifying the budget.
Right.
It's about harnessing the power of data and insights to make better decisions.
Yeah.
And create a real competitive edge.
This report is packed with information.
It
And
is.
it's clear that building a robust effectiveness culture
Right.
is a multifaceted journey.
Yeah.
For our listeners out there who are eager to put these insights into action,
Yeah.
what would you say are the most important first steps?
Well, I'd say the most crucial step is to really embrace a proactive mindset. Don't wait for someone to ask you about the ROI of your marketing efforts.
Right.
Take the initiative to demonstrate the value you're creating by leveraging data and analytics to
Yeah.
drive better decision making.
So instead of playing defense and reacting to questions,
Right.
we should be on the offense using data to tell a compelling story
Exactly.
about the impact of our work.
Exactly. And it's not just about crunching numbers.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the nuances of different measurement approaches
Right.
and using them strategically to answer very specific business questions.
It's about being like a data storyteller, using numbers to paint a picture of how marketing is driving business success.
Yes, exactly. And, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Right.
Just because something has always been measured a certain way doesn't mean that's the best approach or the most accurate approach. Be open to new ideas, new tools, new ways of thinking.
I love that embrace the spirit of experimentation, not just in your campaigns, but also in how you measure and analyze their impact.
Exactly. And remember, this journey towards effectiveness is not a solo mission.
Yeah, okay.
It really does require collaboration and buy-in from everyone,
Yeah.
from the CMO to the intern, open communication knowledge, sharing a willingness to learn from each other.
So it's about breaking down those silos
Yes.
and fostering a culture of shared learning and continuous improvement.
Yes. The report also emphasizes the importance of, developing internal capabilities.
Okay.
Don't just outsource all your measurement needs to external partners.
Right.
Invest in training and development so your team can actually understand the tools and the techniques and ask the right questions
Yeah.
and interpret the data effectively.
So it's about empowering your team to become data-savvy marketers.
Yes.
Who can confidently navigate the complexities of measurement
Right.
and make informed decisions.
One practical tip from the report that I think really stood out to me was the idea of mapping out your brand's value narrative.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so it's that thought-provoking exercise where you imagine what would happen if you stopped advertising altogether.
Yeah.
What would be the impact on your business?
What key channels would you miss the most?
Exactly. It's a really powerful way to uncover hidden assumptions and identify the channels and activities that truly drive value for your brand.
So it's like reverse engineering your marketing strategy.
Yes,
To identify the essential elements that are moving the needle.
precisely. It's about asking the right questions and using the right tools to find those answers. And it's about being persistent and patient.
Yeah.
Building a strong brand takes time, and so does building a strong effectiveness culture.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of marketing effectiveness.
We have.
This report has been an incredible resource.
It has.
I encourage all of our listeners to check it out for themselves. You can find a link in the show notes.
It's a must-read for any marketer who is serious about making their work more impactful
Yes.
and demonstrating the value they're creating.
And as a final thought, I want to leave you with one of the key takeaways from this report.
Okay.
Effectiveness is not a destination. It's a journey.
It is.
It's about embracing continuous learning, challenging assumptions, and never stopping experimenting.
So go forth, dear listeners, and measure with confidence. And remember, the most effective marketers are not those who have all the answers, but those who are always asking the right questions.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a really insightful conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.